Okay, so next, Ken, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Guiming. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. So up next is myself and my two students. We are a team from Singapore who are sharing an independent research study conducted by my pair of students over the past year. So it's not a funded project, and it would be quite different in scale from Meili's and from Xi's project, because those represent countrywide data, whereas ours is really at the other end of the spatial scale, at the micro, local, personal level. This is our primary limitation. So just to set up an expectation, of course, given some funding, which we hope to apply for, we could take this into more meso scales. But currently, the data that we are about to report is at the micro local level. Anne, are you? Would you like me to do the sharing?
Yes. Okay.
You share.
Yes. Okay.
So while Anne is setting up with his screen share, our project is Life2Well. Life2Well is an acronym for learning at the intersection of AI, physiology, environment, and electroencephalographic data, and well-being. In the following slide, we will see that actually what we have tried to do over the past year is we have tried to situate ourselves at the intersection of physiology, and neuroscience in terms of EEG data, and one's local microenvironment stressors, such as relative humidity, temperature, and so on and so forth. So we've approached this from a maker-centric perspective, where as far as possible, we have tried to conceptualize, design, and build our own devices based on the foundational components of each, with the exception of the Fitbit wearables and Huawei data watches, which we were not able to assemble ourselves. So with that, I'll just hand over to my two students, Min An and Min Tuan, who are 16 years old. So please bear with them in terms of be kind with questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lim. As Dr. Lim said, we have three main parts in our project: physiology, neuroscience, and environment. I would like to start with talking about how we collect our environmental data, or precisely microclimate data. We built our own devices, consist of 5 sensors and a motherboard, to measure noise level, light intensity, the amount of dust, carbon dioxide concentration, temperature, humidity, and pressure. We also conceptualized our prototype using day-to-day items like boxes and clothing clips. For the processing board, we use ESP8266, which is a Arduino-compatible board that can read the raw data and send the raw data to our cloud, which it will be stored and processed. Past research has shown that the environment, especially with respect to climate change, has a large impact on our health, mentally and physically, especially for one example, which is thermal regulation. So there has not been any research done on this field, as well as system of devices. If there's been very little done that can measure the environmental data and connect them with physiologic, like our well-being in terms of both physically and on a brainwave, which is mentally. So that brings us to the next measurement, which is the biometric data or physiologic data. We use smartwatches that are reliable on the market to measure the heart rate variability, oxygen saturation, and skin temperature. From these raw data, we can also derive stress level and also sleep score, which is how satisfied one is with his sleep. The data then was, of course, extracted, then sent to our cloud for further processing. For our early stage of the project, we have 5 participants aged 16 to carry the microclimate devices and smartwatches with them for 6 months during their day-to-day activities as well as in their sleep. The participants were also required to fill in a questionnaire on Google Form twice a day to self-assess their mental and physical well-being. To better measure the mental well-being as well as stress-related data, we also use EAG measurement. We built our own headset using tapes, sponge, and devices and sensors that are available on the market to make our so-called DIY headset. And the raw data collected is in time series. Now that we have all the raw data that we need to analyze, using Python is our main platform. For biometric and environmental data, we of course have to identify and remove outliers in the data set. Then we train a random forest regression model, and we use shift summary plot to provide more complex conclusions on the regression model. For the electroencephalogram data is a bit different. We have to first pre-process and extract relevant information from time series. Then we use features as input and regression model. For our regression model, we can also use deep learning, which is convoluted neural network or recurrent neural network on the raw data time series itself. After that, we can infer the relationships from these regression model, which is the relationships between the environment to our physiology, to our well-being, as well as to our brain waves. Next, I will give it to Ton to continue about the result of our research.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. So my name is Minton, and I will talk about our results. So we have collected more than 40,000 data points over the period of 6 months, and the analyzed data from the microclimate devices and smartwatches are put into a table as shown, as you can see. So our table comprises of 3 columns. The first column being the biometric factors, which are the model output of our regression model. The second column being the score, which represents the accuracy of the model. And the third column is environmental feature significance, which is our model input. So as you can see, for the regression model, heart rate variability, short-term heart rate variations, body temperature, sleep score, and stress are fairly accurate as its score value is high. So for the third column, as you can see, the lighter the cell is, the less significant the environmental feature is to the corresponding biometric factor, and vice versa. Also, here is a table representing our minimum value, maximum value, mean value, and standard deviation that we have calculated based on 43,434 data points for the environmental factors. Next is also the same table, but for our biometric variables and well-being. So next, I'll talk about how we determine the accuracy of the model. So we have collected a lot of data points, and from then we have calculated the mean climate values for reference. So as you can see, we have taken that and compared it to the literature from around the world to see if there's any difference in the microclimate in Singapore compared to that around the world. So as you can see in the table, and our regression model, this is the regression model of prediction over true values for heart rate, which is accurate as the R-square value is equal to 0.73, and you can see a trend upward, as well as the oxygen saturation where the R-square value is 0.81. So here are 4 more of the predictions over true values graph that we believe that is highly accurate, which is stress level with R-square value of 0.85, infrared with R-square value of 0.51, sleep score with R-square value of 0.91, and heart rate variability with an R-square value of 0.79. Here are two prediction over true values graph that we feel like it's very accurate as well, although you can see that the data point is actually scattered and parallel to each other, but it actually creates a trend upward. This the reason why it's peculiar is because of this is the data that is self-assessed by the participants, and they rate their mental state and physical state from a scale from 1 to 10 based on the self judgment. So the overall mental state, which is self-assessed by the participants, have an R-square value of 0.81, and the physical states have an R-square value by 0.82. So next, I'll talk about our Shaping summary plot for heart rate. So this is one of the model we use to interpret the overall results of our research. So the heart rate is affected the most by carbon dioxide concentration, ambient sound, ambient temperature, dust concentration, and air pressure. So we found out that the carbon dioxide concentration, if it is lower than 580 parts per million, it tends to cause either lower or higher heart rate. For infrared radiation, if it is lower than 260 lumen, it also can cause higher or lower heart rate. And for the other factors, especially one interesting factor we have found out about inhaled dust, PM2.5, from research by Reacher in 1999, is that it increased our stress response, and therefore it can lead to inflammation of lungs and narrowing airways, and finally can lead to increased heart rate, as you can see in the Shapley summary plot. And next, I'll talk about the Shapley summary plot for stress score. So it is affected the most by mostly infrared radiation, secondly, carbon dioxide concentration, and thirdly, ambient temperature. For infrared radiation, if it is lower than 260 lumen, it causes high stress score. For carbon dioxide concentration, if it is higher than 880 parts per million, it also causes higher stress level. And finally, for ambient temperature, if it is lower than 30 degrees Celsius, it can cause lower stress score. And stress score is an indication of our stress level. And this is a value calculated by our smartwatch. For the Shapley summary plot for body temperature, we found out that the body temperature is more affected by sound, dust concentration, and ambient temperature. An increase in ambient sound causes higher body temperature, and a decrease in dust concentration below 20 microgram per meter cube also cause higher body temperature, and the ambient temperature higher than 30 degrees Celsius can also cause higher body temperature. So I'll talk a little bit about, I'll recap a bit about our research. So the most significant microclimate factors are ambient noise, dust concentration, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature. We feel like the devices and data obtained can be implemented into our daily lives to improve the environment and the well-being of the community in various ways. So firstly, we think that it can be implemented into the ecosystem of smart homes. The reason for which is that it can automatically adjust and change the internal environment of a home such that it can suit the user's well-being and the physical state. Secondly, we feel like it can be used to implement it into personal health devices. So that it can perform more complex functions like predicting strokes, or even like call emergency when before the stroke even happened, as it can detect the abnormal data coming from the patients and analyze it with the environment. And finally, we can improve the residents' life satisfaction and productivity by restructuring the landscape of our urban cities. And this is research conducted by Palmer and Salvati in 2020. So in conclusion, we feel like our research is actually limited by our limited age group and gender. Also due to COVID-19, we feel like the diversity of our microclimate data is very reduced. And finally, we think that prototype size is quite bulky, as this is our first time doing this. The microclimate device can be very bulky, and it's sometimes hard to carry around. For improvements in extension, we can conduct it with a larger number of participants with different age groups and a longer duration, especially to improve the accuracy of model. So the regression model can be improved in various ways, whether through algorithms or feeding to more raw data. And mean radiant temperature can be added to show the energy burden on participants, which is one of the area that we'll add we'll want to explore later. And finally, we want to investigate the effects of microclimate on brain activity with AAG measurements that Manan has mentioned at our methodology. Here are our references that we have used in this presentation. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. Do you have any questions?
Right. Thank you very much. I think we probably have a bit time for just one brief question. Any question from the audience?
Yes, Lena has a question in the chat. Antoine, would you like to respond to it? Did you combine data points from all participants into one data set?
Yes, we did consider training the data set dependently on for each participant and combine together, see the difference. But in the result reported in this in our project is of course the combined result, but we do consider that each participant do respond differently. Although we see the same train of data and relationships between these factors are kept quite similar between each of the participant regression model. So we just report in general, but yes, we do consider the fact that each participant do respond to the environment factors differently.
Okay, cool.